The first time I saw the message, my chest felt like someone had pressed their thumb into it and held it there until the air left my lungs. I was standing in the kitchen making coffee at 2 in the morning because insomnia and finals are a toxic combo, and Alex's phone buzzed on the counter. It lit up with a name I thought I knew inside and out. Rachel. The preview was just a sliver of a sentence, nothing dramatic on its own, but the way it sat there, bright and casual, felt like a hot coal in my hand. "Can't wait to see you tonight," it said. The wink. Of all things, the audacity of a wink from my cousin to my boyfriend through a cracked screen. My stomach dropped and then rose into cold, furious motion. If you'd told me when we were 8, smeared with glitter from those sleepover craft nights, trading clothes and secrets under covers, that Rachel would do something like this, I would have laughed until the fat kid in me hurt. We were sisters in everything but blood, raised like family, yes, but chosen. I remember us whispering about opening a little boutique together when we grew up, lining racks with clothes that smelled faintly of our summer at Grandma's, putting our initials on the door. Rachel was always the louder one, the one with the flash. I was content to be steady, the one who counted and paid and made sure things ran. She wanted glamour and shortcuts. I wanted work and steadiness. I should have seen the line between us then, should have noticed the way she polished surfaces but not foundations. Hindsight is a slow teacher. I didn't check the phone right away. I sat on the kitchen floor and replayed the image of that little glowing notification in my head until it made a rhythm, a stupid, repeating beat I couldn't silence. When I finally picked the phone up, when I scrolled through their messages like an amateur archaeologist, the earth around me shifted. There was flirting, carefully casual at first, then brazen, photos, jokes with double meanings, plans. Alex wrote back in ways I'd never heard him address me. He told her things he'd told me. He sent pictures that had once been private ghosts between us. The words blurred until I couldn't tell them apart from the sound of my own breath. Confronting him felt like exposing an abscess. It hurt, but you had to pull it out. I remember the living room's light being too bright, the way the carpet felt under my feet like sand. Each step a small, painful separation from the world I thought I had built. "Did you sleep with her?" It was blunt, ugly, the words spilling out because they needed to. He stared at me, and the look on his face wasn't so much guilt as confusion, like I was accusing him of misplacing his keys rather than breaking a vow. He admitted it. He admitted weeks of sneaking. He said, "It just happened," which is another way of saying, "I chose this thing that hurt you because it was easier than telling the truth." Alex, who tasted like coffee and late-night philosophy to me, became suddenly thin around the edges, like a page with a tear. Betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it's drip-fed until the cup overflows. Rachel didn't just flirt. She engineered. She knew what to say, how to look. She leaned on me with the kind of sisterly charm that made our relatives trust her. Then, when the breakup was still raw and I was walking across a campus that felt like a foreign country, Rachel began to bend our story into something else. In whispered phone calls and casual complaints to anyone who would listen, she painted me as volatile. She can't handle it. She's lashing out. People who had been neutral shifted away. My aunt stopped inviting me to the holidays for a while. They said it was for everyone's peace. Watch how people choose the quiet over truth when drama threatens their comfort. How quickly a brother-in-law will choose not to know because knowledge requires movement. Do you know the worst part? It wasn't even just the cheating or the rumors. It was that these were the people I had trusted most. We'd built entire summers and secrets on each other. You can forgive the stranger a transgression. It's the familiar faces that carve the deepest marks. I wanted revenge, but the kind you see in movies, hot, impulsive, satisfying in 3 beats, feels hollow in real life. I wanted a revenge that settled like a stone at the bottom of a pond, quieting the ripples for good. I wanted her not to have the stage anymore. So I waited. I paced my life like a watchmaker, measuring ticks and tiny gears, saving small scraps of proof like notes in the margins. That was the key I learned. Patience. Patience turns anger into an instrument. It separates you from chance and keeps your hands clean. Rachel's brand was glamour. If you scroll through the early feeds of her interior design pages, you'd see glossy chairs perched under impossibly photogenic light. She was the kind of carousel you could lose an hour in, before and afters that made you sigh at the cleverness of a throw pillow. She loved that glow, but behind the glow, there were splinters. She cut corners, not because she had to, but because she could, because everything was performative. She used cheap fixtures, passed off cut-rate material as custom-made, and lied to clients about timelines. She told electricians and carpenters she'd pay, and then rewired their trust with half-promises. Contractors whispered, clients called her creative because they didn't yet know the word fraud. She was building a castle on borrowed light. I knew where to look. Once years earlier, I had alphabetized her invoices in a frantic weekend where she was drowning in a move and asked if I could help. I not only had her ability to make things pretty, I had the receipts, the email chains, the way her lies were sewn into her files like cheap thread. My role was small, and when you help someone stumble, you remember the shape of the fall. Those emails never left my mind. They sat there in the back of my head like a coiled thing waiting to unwind. Collecting the evidence felt bizarrely clinical. I became a librarian of her lies, methodically logging screenshots, organizing contracts, backing up files and encrypted folders. It reads so simple when I say it, screenshots here, receipts there, but it was late nights and coffee, and the kind of obsessive focus that keeps you awake. There were texts where she joked about marking up materials beyond what she paid for. There were contractors' messages asking for the money she had promised months before. There were angry emails from clients who had paid for high-end upgrades and received plywood choices that split on contact. The truth wasn't explosive on its own. The truth is often prosaic, a slow accumulation of small betrayals. The trick was to make the pattern visible. The day I decided to act, the air outside was the brittle kind of cold that suggests I was supposed to stay home. I drove to the licensing board with a surge I could barely label. Fear, adrenaline, a kind of righteous anger that felt purifying. I handed them a tidy packet, contracts, receipts, before and after photos showing where things had failed. They took it with a polite nod, like bureaucrats always do when a citizen brings a problem dressed in paper. Then I went to the state attorney's office because I had a feeling it would take more than a reprimand to dislodge the rot. I wrote a long, careful letter to a local reporter whose work on consumer scams I'd read in the past. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted accountability. The first domino fell sooner than I expected. The state called for an investigation, and the licensing board suspended her provisional credentials on probable cause. The local reporter sent a request for comment. A Facebook post here, a thread there from angry clients, and Rachel's facade began to chip. People underestimate how fast reputation dissolves when someone points a light at the seams. When I first saw her Instagram after the initial articles ran, it was still full of her usual glow, but the comments were different. There were people tagging friends. Look at this. I hired her. She did the same. The chorus of voices made the story credible. Even her admirers started to notice the smell of smoke. If you're reading this and thinking it sounds merciless, well, I'll ask you,
Would you have waited? Be honest. Would you have waited this long for payback if someone dismantled the life you believed in, stitch by stitch? People keep asking me if I felt vindictive when the lawsuits came down. My answer is complicated because it's never purely justice or revenge. It's the satisfaction of setting the scales to balance. It's watching the person who gaslighted you finally meet a world that asks for receipts. But nothing moves in a vacuum. Rachel fought back. She called family, spun tales about being targeted, and master manipulator that she is, painted herself as the wronged entrepreneur, the victim of a jealous cousin. She posted pictures of tears and late nights of a woman trying to build her dream. Some people believed her. My aunt texted me once,
"Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" Yes, I was sure. But the sting of that message, coming from someone who'd once been my confidant, was another kind of hurt. You don't get to pick who doubts you, and the worst feeling was watching the family fracture again, this time over paperwork and publicity rather than clothes and sleepovers. I learned to expect close calls. There was the day Rachel's lawyer called my number, an aggressive, clipped voice who asked if I'd retract my statements. I told him, "I won't lie," and hung up. My phone exploded with messages from a contractor who'd been threatened. They're trying to make us say the invoices are fake. It was the kind of low-level intimidation I'd read about in court dramas. I kept a calendar of threats, a ledger of calls, and I kept forwarding everything to the authorities and my reporter contact. I didn't want to be cavalier. Transparency was my armor. There were nights that felt like waiting for a storm that never came. A critical deposition got postponed. A judge's schedule tangled mine. I had to testify in front of people who'd once called me dramatic at Thanksgiving. Sitting at the stand, looking at a line of lawyers and a woman who used to pull my hair into pigtails, I felt the old helplessness come back in a cold trickle. But then I would think of the contractors who'd been stiffed, the clients whose kitchens now smelled of damp because of poor insulation, and the resolve would return like a tide. Rachel's collapse was not a single cinematic moment. It was a slow dismantling, like watching a painting fade under constant sun. There were lawsuits that named her, fines that drained her account, and angry clients who made their stories public. The state board's finding, negligence, fraud, misrepresentation, felt like an indictment in a small town. Her license suspended. She scrambled. She tried to salvage credibility through frantic posts offering refunds and apologies that read thin next to the emails I'd printed. She started to look smaller in photographs, the confident tilt of her chin replaced by a wary glance, as if she feared the camera would catch her in the act of being discovered. The emotional climactic moment, the one people want to call satisfying, came at a family gathering. It wasn't planned as spectacle. It was an ordinary Sunday. Casseroles, a mountain of plastic cups, kids chasing each other through the living room. Rachel arrived late, which was new. She hadn't worn her usual carefully curated outfit. She had a plain sweater, and her hair lay flatter than before. She made small jokes that landed like muffled knocks. You could sense the hesitation in the room, the way people leaned into their pasta salads rather than into conversation. Then she saw me. Her eyes widened in a way that wasn't shame so much as recognition. The recognition that someone she had tried to break had not only survived, but had been the agent of her unraveling. She approached me with that same practiced charm and a voice pitched to precise vulnerability. "Please, help me. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Your family. Don't let me sink." The words were raw and brittle. I stood there and my body remembered everything, from those early sleepover nights to the sting of her whispers that bent our family's narrative. My hands were empty. There was a ridiculous, childish urge to slap them.
There was also a deeper urge to hand her an envelope with a list of the contractors she'd hurt, or to say every sentence I'd rehearsed when I'd imagined this meeting. You had every chance. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said something that felt like the last rational chord in a long symphony of hurt. You sunk yourself. It was not a taunt. It wasn't even cruel. It was the truth, stripped from melodrama. It left no room for theatrics. There was a silence so tight that it could have been cut with a knife. The room, which had been waiting for a scene, instead folded into heavy, private conversations. People looked away from Rachel. Some avoided my gaze. Others nodded not at me, but at the truth alighting in the air. The family's turning of their backs was not coordinated. It was instinctive. They'd watched someone they thought they knew choose shortcuts and betray, and now they had to decide where their loyalty lived. Most chose the truth. After that, the aftermath was quieter than I had imagined. I didn't gloat. I didn't parade the files or throw her things into a bonfire. There is a perverse drama to public humiliation, and I refused to indulge it. Justice, to me, had never been about spectacle. It was about consequence. She lost clients and then her license. The lawsuits drained her funds and eventually her social sway. She showed up at family events like an apology in motion, and people treated her with a cautious distance. That distance, to me, felt like the final accounting. And there was, inevitably, a hollowness. Dismantling her life didn't stitch my own back together. It didn't restore the nights I had spent crying until my pillow was a wet island. You might expect to feel elated after ruining someone who wronged you, but human emotions rarely mimic the neat arcs of fiction. Instead, there was a complex mix of vindication, sorrow, and an odd kind of exhaustion. The craft of collecting truth is lonely. Even when others validate you, the long nights of sifting through emails are a private pilgrimage. So, what did I learn in those bruised, practical months? The first lesson: evidence matters. Truth is a blunt instrument if you don't polish it into a shard. The second: patience is a weapon. It's less flashy than a fist, but far more precise. The third: not everyone will stand with you, and that's okay. Sometimes people bow out to keep their own peace, and you cannot make them brave. The last and perhaps cruelest lesson is that some people will always choose the surface over the substance until a glaring contradiction forces them to look. People have asked me, was it worth it? And the answer is never clean. If your metric is revenge as catharsis, I will tell you this: the immediate satisfaction fades. If your metric is justice, forcing someone who lied to clients and lived off other people's labor to answer for it, then yes. If your metric is healing, then sometimes justice helps, sometimes it just scours the wound and leaves a scar. Scars are reminders. They are also maps of where we have been. There are things I still think about. I think about Rachel sometimes, not with hate, but with a kind of bewildered pity. What did she want so badly that she was willing to cut at everything in her path? I think about the little sister dreams we had as kids, the boutique with our initials, and how one woman's hunger transformed into theft. I think about Alex, who learned what consequences look like when someone else's life becomes a cautionary tale. He remarried eventually. His life moved on. I forgave him. Not because his betrayal deserved it, but because forgiveness was a way of decoupling my life from his mistakes. Do you ever replay moments and imagine different choices? I do. Sometimes I imagine confronting Rachel earlier, not letting her weave narratives about me to our relatives. Sometimes I imagine walking away entirely, leaving them both to their devices, and choosing peace. Those fantasies are seductive, but not necessarily realistic. I made the choice I made because I wanted the truth to matter beyond my private grief. If you're sitting there wondering what I would do in your shoes, I can't answer for you. I can only tell you what it felt like to be inside them, a weight of hurt, a careful collection of facts, and a deliberate choice to let the world decide the outcome. I was not a vigilante. I was not someone consumed by rage to the point of self-destruction. I was, at times, petty. I won't deny the small pleasures of seeing a smug post evaporate under public scrutiny, but mostly I was methodical because method kept me human. There is a final, gentle truth I want to offer that has nothing to do with revenge. The people who love you will see the truth when it matters. Some will see it sooner, some will take longer, and some may never look at all. That's a bitter pill, but a practical one. Living your life with integrity is the only real revenge that doesn't require planning, because it quietly proves itself every time to wake up and do the honest thing. So yes, Rachel lost her business, her license, and most of the social momentum she'd built. She lost the narrative she had tried to craft about me, too. But what I ultimately kept was mine. The steadiness I had cultivated since girlhood, the hours of honest work, and the knowledge that when pushed to choose between glitter and foundation, I'd built on foundation. If you want a tidy moral, it would be this. People can ruin you, but rarely without leaving a paper trail. Keep your receipts, not just for tax season, but for life. Keep your friends close and your contracts closer. And if you ever find the thumb pressing against your chest, making it hard to breathe,
remember that you don't have to react in the moment. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is gather the truth and let justice, slow, imperfect, and often bureaucratic, do its work. So I walked away from that family meal. I watched as people drifted back into the safe chatter of casseroles and soccer schedules. Rachel stood for a moment, unmoving, and then she turned away. I felt a strange mix of pity and release. The story didn't end with fireworks or cinematic arrest. It ended with a woman who had chosen shortcuts, discovering that the road to ruin is paved with small, repeated lies. And for me, that was more satisfying than any public spectacle could have been. Justice was not something I broadcast. It was a quiet thing that found its way into the record, into the hands of the people who mattered, and into the slow, practical undoing of a life built on appearance. If you're ever faced with something like this, if someone you trusted takes a crowbar to your life, ask yourself, do you want a snap decision or a strategy? Are you fighting for wound closure or for systemic accountability? Both are valid. Both carry costs. And finally, if you've stayed with me this long, if you've listened to this messy human thing that unfolded like a poorly bound book, thank you. Tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have waited? Would you have walked away at the family gathering? Or would you have stayed and let the words hang in the air a little longer? Life gives us choices that define who we become more than who we were. I chose the slow path. It wasn't always righteous. It was, for me, the only one that felt like it might hold up under the weight of what happened.